Anthony, how did Grambling go from one win a year ago to one win away from a division title?
That's the question that opponents around the SWAC have been asking throughout the season, and that question really starts and stops with Tiger alum Broderick Fobbs. He came in and brought leadership to this program at a level that they haven't had in a number of years, up now for the Eddie Robinson Award, such a prestigious honor, one of only 20 coaches in the country. But offensively, he had to make a major decision during the season, and he put Jonathan Williams at the quarterback position. And Williams would be leading the SWAC in total offense if he had enough starts this season. Doesn't like the term dual threat quarterback, so Paul, I'm going to call him a dual weapon.
For me, as football guy, as a jock, as somebody who didn't study broadcasting, I wasn't a journalism major in school, there are some things that felt natural, that came naturally to me in the television or in radio that I was able to get into fairly quickly. But for me, I'm always trying to get new skills and develop new ideas, new concepts. I've gotten to produce features over the years. Actually, I work and I brought a few business cards with me as well, that if anybody, after we finish, wants to come grab a card from me, got a few cards. But I also work with the Arena Football League. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications for the AFL, our office. We got one in the River North area, one over in Des Plaines. We got an office out in Vegas. And so I get to work as an executive in the business as well. And so for me, on a day-in, day-out basis, I'm in the office during the week. I'm negotiating our television deals we have with ESPN and CBS during the Arena Football season in the spring and summer. I'm training the various media departments that we have around the league. We've got 8 different teams around the league. We got a lot of teams out west, and like Portland and Los Angeles and other cities. We've got teams down in Florida, a couple of other teams down south. So I get to see a lot of different angles of the business. It's not because I wanted to grow up and be a sports executive. It just something through relationships I developed, things that I enjoyed pursuing. This opportunity came available a few years ago. The commissioner of the league ended up trusting me to do this, and so that's been more amazing experience that I've had getting to be in the business as well. And it's really aided me as a broadcaster to get to see that part of the business, that side of how deals get set up. And for me to work with our digital partners, we broadcast games online with ESPN3. Prior to that, I had a deal I set up with CBS Interactive. Prior to that, I had a deal I set up with Ustream. Prior to that, I had a separate digital partner. And so whether it's the digital media, radio deals with SiriusXM or different local vendors we have, I get to see a lot of different areas of media, of entertainment. I don't know 10 years from now what I'm going to be doing in media and entertainment, but I do know from the various angles of the industry that I've gotten to see at this point. I know I enjoy it. I know I've gotten a lot out of it. And for me, whether it's the versatility on the air or being able to just enjoy different things that I do in front of the camera and behind, I know it's a fun business. It can be a very frustrating business. I did, believe it or not, hear no quite a bit, and still to this day, I hear no quite a bit. Even something as simple as earlier today. I mean, Jamie and I were laughing about it today. There's a digital sports network here in Chicago called 120 Sports, and they gutted the old Harpo studios that Oprah used to own. And so Oprah's completely out of there now. She's out in Los Angeles. And Jerry Reinsdorf, who owns the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago White Sox, he's got a company called Silver Chalice, and they've got multiple digital sports networks that they run out of the old Harpo studios. Sometimes they have me do something, sometimes they don't. I knew this initial chunk of the year I was going to have a little more time available because my college football season ends with like an event like I did right there, the U.S. Army Bowl, which is a high school All-America game. It's really a difficult broadcast because I don't cover high school football throughout the year, but I do some events for NBC, so games like the Bayou Classic, where Grambling and Southern play each other down in New Orleans. I don't cover the SWAC, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, throughout the season, so that midterm is a little bit more difficult going into that because I'm not paying attention to the SWAC throughout the year, but I get ready in time for the broadcast. Same thing with the U.S. Army Bowl. I'm not covering high school football, but leading into that game, it's a great opportunity down in San Antonio. Some of the best players in the country. If you follow college football, guys like Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey, who were the top 2 in the Heisman race this year, they were both in the U.S. Army Bowl. Saw them as high schoolers a couple of years back. Guys like Andrew Luck have been in the game, Adrian Peterson. So that's a cool event to do, but it's a very difficult broadcast. And the guys are declaring, they're on the air, they got the hats on the table, and they're switching them back and forth, declaring their school. So things like that are things that I enjoy doing, but there's all that preparation, all that work that goes into it on the front end to have yourself ready to be able to manage that level of broadcast. So I think opportunity is a big word that I think all of us, and the fact that you're here, I think means you realize that opportunity and the pursuit of those opportunities is huge in this industry, and versatility. If I leave you with any two things tonight, opportunity, the pursuit of those, and versatility within the industry, because if you do pigeonhole yourself, it's fine. There's people who do it. There's people who do it at a very successful level. But I'd like to consider myself an example of somebody who, while there is maybe a resume I come into the industry with, there's always somebody who's, whether, for me, I'm a Big Ten guy, like Paige referenced. I worked at the Big Ten Network the first few years at BTN. I eventually transitioned out of the Big Ten Network. I'm not a Pac-12 guy. I don't have ties to Pac-12 schools, but I got an opportunity with the Pac-12 Network. Who knows, maybe Reggie Bush retires next year and says, I want that guy's job. They may give it to him, no matter whether Reggie's been on television before or not. But there's always somebody who, because it's such a subjective type of business and how you get evaluated, whether it's the look, the sound, somebody may hate my voice, somebody may think my head's too pointy, whatever it comes down to. But my philosophy, whether it was as an athlete, as a coach, as someone in broadcast, media, entertainment, versatility, I think is key. You're going to figure out which lane suits you best, what you're best at. But to me, the more experience you have and how you try to develop that experience will help you continue to get opportunities. If this is something that you think you want to pursue full time, I imagine you're all maybe still somewhat in the process of figuring that out. But while you go down that road, the more versatility you can try to have, it's going to help you determine what you're best at, and it's going to help you make yourself available to more opportunities when they come up. And the more you can get from a repetition standpoint, by my estimation, the better. It's a good question. The position we're in and I assume everyone heard, but Jamie was asking when's the last time I had to tell someone no. The way we do arena football broadcasts, and for me, I was talent. I was one of the announcers for the AFL on the NFL Network before I ended up coming into the executive role that I have with the Arena Football League office. So at this point, I do have a lot of sway over who the announcers are on the air. The networks end up getting the final call, ESPN or CBS, but I get to recommend the announcers that we use. Of course, I recommend myself. I send my reel in, and fortunately, they let me continue to call the games. But yes, it's a great deal. Works out well for me. But aside from that, the other announcers that we use also get evaluated by the networks, and they have the final say on who gets on the air. For the way we utilize the sideline reporters in the game, it's a little different than your standard broadcast, where normally a sideline reporter is somebody who does injury updates, somebody who may talk about the weather, somebody who tells some interpersonal sort of stories about players on the field, conducting interviews with coaches, things like that, where maybe you don't need a deeper X's and O's sort of understanding of the game itself. For arena football, it's a very different game. The field is smaller. It's a more condensed atmosphere. The rules are very different. The net's behind the end zones, walls surrounding it, all types of things. I won't get into all the minutia, but it's a different game. For us, because of that, we actually use, as opposed to a sideline reporter, we use what we like to call a sideline analyst or a field analyst. So we normally put a player or a coach who knows arena football, who can communicate it at a high level. We'll use that person on the sideline. And so for me, while I would like to have, I guess, more of a variety of the presence that we use on the air, because of specifically how we utilize that position during the game, we don't use kind of your standard sideline reporter. So quite often, where people tend to view the sideline position as someone who, if I don't know the sport at a high level, I can still add to the broadcast in this way. Quite often I have to tell sideline reporters that, we don't really have, if you didn't play or coach arena football, we don't have a use for that within the show the way we formatted it the last few years, because it does make for a very different, more interactive sort of broadcast than what you get with the outdoor game if you're watching a college football or an NFL broadcast. So that would be an example, because the skill set doesn't really suit what we're looking for. If you don't know the AFL at a high level, then I've had to tell a lot of sideline reporters no. When I do have a situation that's outside my comfort zone, one of the things I like to do is talk to people within that space, somebody within the industry beforehand. Like, I've done some commercials over the years. I'm not an actor. I mean, do I feel like I can emote, can deliver a message? Sure, but I haven't done a lot of acting. So when I've done commercials in the past, I always like to get on the phone, or when I can, depending on where we're living at that point, meet with people who are actually actors, and especially people who've done commercial acting a good bit before, because to me, that's always a good resource to talk to people who've been in that field, who have the same type of experience that you're preparing to go through, because it does give you, especially if it's someone you trust, it gives you that knowledge base where you can take advantage of whatever information they're giving you, and try to avoid being concerned about sounding dumb with any questions. I know we all hear this, whether it's in a classroom or out in a public venue somewhere, wherever you're at. try not to concern yourself with sounding dumb. And especially in a scenario like I'm talking about here, where you may be one-on-one with someone trying to ask a question. Maybe some questions are too dumb, but there's not many of them, because if it's something you're thinking about, it's very likely something that someone else has thought about at some point too. So if it's something you're concerned about, especially if it's something that may make you hesitate when you're going through something, you want to eliminate the possibility for hesitation and get yourself as comfortable as you can going into that scenario. And then from there, it's just going to be about getting as many of your own repetitions with it as you can to increase and enhance the level of comfort you have with it. Great question. So essentially during a blowout broadcast for sports, I'm assuming most of you heard Courtney, but how do you keep the game entertaining? You know, I've had games where it's over, especially early during the college football season where, you know, Stanford is playing Army or something like that, just a team who isn't going to be able to maintain a competitive level during the game. You'll usually know more often than not going in if there's a good opportunity for a blowout going into a broadcast, but again, going back to the point I was making earlier about preparation, I try to treat every game like a potential blowout, just because, and especially for me during the college football season where there's more interest of the interpersonal types of stories for the players during a college broadcast than there tends to be during the NFL. You won't as often hear NFL broadcasters do a lot of the backstories on the guy. I mean, you know, if there's something that's really a gut-wrenching sort of story, you know, they'll get into it. For a college broadcaster, you hear it more often where there's a lot of storytelling in between the plays. And it's one of the things that the tempo of college football has made difficult, because a lot of teams are going no huddle. There's less time in between snaps, and so there's not as much time to storytell in between plays. But you want to be able to draw in as much of the audience as you can. And so what you're hoping by the time you actually get in that blowout scenario is that you've maybe gripped certain members of the audience and you've sort of dropped little nuggets, little seeds throughout the show to have them wondering about that backup running back. And these are things that in the production meetings beforehand, you communicate with your producer, with your director about. Our directors will usually do camera meetings. I don't have to, but I attend the camera meetings with the camera guys just so they know if we're going to have an ISO camera available for this particular wide receiver, here's the technique he likes to use, here's the routes he likes to run, so the camera guy's ready. But most importantly, I'm likely to storytell about this particular guy in a scenario to make sure the whole crew is ready, just because it's, I guess, going back to a lot of the different experience I've had in the industry, I like to have everyone, you know, sort of thinking along a similar line to me. And so in a blowout scenario like that, my hope is that if I've done my job correctly, that someone is waiting to hear more about an individual player from a few breadcrumbs that I've sort of planted throughout the show, to have them, you know, wanting to know whether or not this particular kid or that grown man, it may be in some cases, is going to make a play. And even if he doesn't make a big play, that he's going to be out there onto the field. You know, the movie Rudy or whatever the case may be, if they were really on top of their thing, they'd know, okay, this is Rudy's first show. This is Rudy's first time on the field. We'll see if Notre Dame ends up in a blowout scenario, if this Rudy kid gets on the field and director cuts over, you see Rudy on the sideline and he's kind of getting himself ready and he's a little chilly and he's not in the game yet, and then you pan back to it, third quarter. All right, they're up by 2 scores, but it's still a close game. Director cuts over to him, you storytell about him a little bit. Then by the time you get to the fourth quarter and Rudy's actually in the game at that point, now everyone is gripped. Now no matter whether they're down by 4 touchdowns or 8 touchdowns, you get that broadcasting, you know, that's, you know, part of that term that's obviously used in the industry, where it's not narrow casting. You want to try to grip as many of the viewers as you can. And so all that preparation, and you're going to use, at least, you know, for me, if you're doing the amount of homework that for a football broadcast, at least, if you're going in, you maybe are going to use 10 or 15% of what you've studied throughout a given week or throughout a given month heading into a show. So afterwards, there's kind of this information dump where you don't know what you're going to do with the rest of it. But, you know, my boards that, you know, we're getting passed around are so filled in so extensively, because for that moment, whoever the Rudy may be for a particular show, and sometimes I'll even highlight a particular guy going into a game just to know, all right, that's somebody who I'm going to focus on. That's a particular person I'm going to try to make sure the audience cares about, because if they care about him, they're not going to worry nearly as much about the score. And then at some point, you've used up all the stuff on your board. Then it's about the interpersonal relationship you have with the person you're calling the game with. And if you've developed a good rapport there, if you're having fun, if you're enjoying the show, if you're not belittling the product that's on the field and it still seems like a big deal to you, then usually the audience is still along for that ride with you. And it's about you as sort of the traffic cop, the director of the show, to be able to keep everyone involved as much as you can. It can be a very difficult thing, as it sounds like you know. If I wasn't doing TV, what would I be doing? I'd be teaching in some capacity. I like to share my knowledge. I like to share my experience with people before I was in television. Really, as I was transitioning into television and radio, I was transitioning into coaching as well. This takes up so much of my time that I'm not a full-time coach with any team anymore. Still do a lot of football camps and a lot of speaking engagements at schools and whatnot. But for me, something like this setting, to be able to impart any knowledge, any experience that I have on people who are trying to pursue a field that I'm knowledgeable of, I'm all about it, whether I'm teaching football, whether I'm teaching English, which my degree was in, whether I'm teaching broadcasting, radio, television, whatever. If there's something that, to me, I feel like I can deliver some information and help somebody out, I'm all about that. So if I wasn't doing this, I would be teaching in some capacity. Good question. Of course, everyone in the industry ends up having their own separate preferences for it. For me personally, what comes most naturally is game analyst, color commentator during the games, calling the action, using the telestrator, explaining why a particular play worked, or, being able to do some storytelling between the snaps when some of those things happen as well. So I didn't include a lot of the stuff with, like, during the game, breaking stuff down, telestration and all that. I've got other reels with those things, but like I said, I just kind of threw this together yesterday. But for me, I'd say that's where I feel most natural because of my background, because of my experience. I wasn't a classically trained journalist. I was a football guy. I'm still a football guy. I just communicated well enough where people want to pay me to do it. But game analyst, I would say, would be maybe top of the list for where I feel most comfortable. It came most naturally to me after playing and coaching. Beyond that, I would say what I find personally most difficult, like the reporting, because I've done a lot of it, that I feel fine with. Hosting was new to me this fall with the Pac-12 network, and honestly, it was a little bit daunting, and they left the decision up to me a little bit if I wanted to continue being an analyst, but they said, we feel like you can handle being a host, we feel like you can lead a discussion, we feel like you can get us in and out of break, we feel like you can keep track of the stuff that's on the show rundown and handle the producer being in your ear and all this. And the idea wasn't mine. The idea was from a couple of producers who I'd worked with on different remotes last year, covering the NFL draft and covering the combine, and producers who didn't usually work with me during studio shows or during games, and they just saw a certain skill set that they felt like I possessed to be able to be a host, even though I'd hosted radio shows before, but obviously a television studio show is very different with the rundowns and shot sheets and those types of things. So a lot of that was new to me this year, very daunting. Talked to my wife, Kelly. I talked to my wife about it a good bit going into it, just not being certain if it was something I wanted to do, if it'd be a good decision or not. As, football guy trying to host is becoming a little bit more prevalent in the industry, but it's mostly a network like the NFL network where they just got content nonstop, 24/7. They're looking for a lot of hosts. For me, it was different. But as hopefully I maybe delivered the message that I do like new challenges, I do like new opportunities. So I went for it. It went well enough. But to lead the discussions, to keep track of the rundowns, keep everyone else on task, and handle all the minutia that goes with being a studio host, while it was most difficult, it was to me a great new challenge for something for me in the industry, and I'm happy I did it. And I'm under the impression they're going to want me to keep doing it. So I love opportunities. Oh. It's hard at first. It is very hard at first. So how do you deal with the noise talking around? And, for some of you who maybe aren't, if you're not in sports, but if you want to be, whether it's a meteorologist or if you want to be a news reporter or a field reporter, even if you want to work in radio, there may not be quite as many voices in radio, but it's one of the things you'll have to get used to in the industry is having a headset on, or having an IFB in your ear, and while you're delivering information that maybe some of it a little better than other parts of that information. So while all that's going on in your head, you got a producer who gets in your ear who says, all right, 30 seconds to the rollout. Oh, well, okay, we're about to roll out to break. I got to finish this thought while the producer's starting to count in my ear. Okay, get a last thought from Ronnie Lott. Oh, well, okay, all right, well, let me finish this thought. everybody wants to hear from Ronnie a lot more than they want to hear from me. So let me get this thought done. Let me toss it to Ronnie. Let me try to make eye contact with Ronnie so I can make sure he's going to stop talking with enough time for me to deliver this last little sponsored element before we get off the air. And then 5, 4, we'll be right back with the Pac-12 pregame show. And, all that is happening in the midst of you trying to keep, your eggs from not being too scrambled. So when I'm talking about repetition, that is one of the things that maybe, especially for some people, takes the most reps because there's so many different parts of your brain that are processing information at the same time. Like, does anybody play a drum set? Any drummers in the room? I mean, for me, if I sit down in a drum set, I haven't done it a lot, but when you're trying to have the left arm keeping time one way, the right arm keeping time another way, the bass drum, the kick drum down here doing something else, there's a lot going on with your brain while all that is happening. And so if you can manage a drum set, I'm guessing you can manage maybe people talking in your ear, but it can be a very difficult task. And it's, going back to the repetition thing, and I'm repeating that because it is so important. Don't feel like you're going to step on camera, step on the air, and just get it right. Even if you get it right the first time, because I was about to say don't feel like you're going to get it right the first time, because you might. You're not going to get it right the first 10 times or the first 20 times. I've been doing this for a long time at this point. My first time on the air actually getting paid to do a broadcast was 2006. So it's been, about a decade for me, and I've done a lot over the past decade. I've got a fairly extensive resume with stuff I get paid for, stuff I don't get paid for, but stuff that I really enjoy doing. You're never going to get it perfect. You're not going to get it perfect every time. The more you do it, the more you'll realize that the mistakes aren't nearly as bad as they feel in the moment. You go back and watch the tape. All right, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And then you'll also realize that some of the stuff you thought was great really wasn't all that great. And maybe, I need to, realize that my stuff, still smells a little bit worse than I think it does. And just the more you can do it, the more you'll kind of ride the waves, the highs and lows, and kind of get through the no's, because you'll hear plenty of no's in every part of this industry. All right, anybody else? All right, well, thank you very much for your time. Glad you're all here. Look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.